got one or two. I heard Aaron Patrick might be here from the AFR. Have we got any journalists here? Can we just see if there's any?
No, start that.
Yeah, okay, good. I just want to know. All right, we're on the record. On the record. It's always dangerous. Dangerous. In fact, Mark and I engaged in a kind of competition to see, earlier this year, to see who could push the envelope the hardest. You know, Mark won. Right? You know, we're talking a lot about India at the moment, Adani Coal. I see we've got the AFR here, you know, Australia's major business paper, which campaigns against Australia's biggest industry.
And most industries.
Thanks very much, AFR. Love your support for industry. And we have tonight a competitor event taking place, as Mark so memorably and permanently named them, the US Confusion Centre is holding its event, in which 30 out of 30 professional analysts in a 50-50 bet, like a roulette wheel, red or black, 30 out of 30 landed on the wrong number at the US Confusion Centre. Now, I would say to you, you know, with respect to Aaron Patrick, whom I like, I can't help liking despite my better instincts, you know, there wasn't a single leading analytical figure at the Australian Financial Review, with the exception of Rowan Dean, the third amigo, who picked the right answer on the biggest question facing the world. So here you've got the US Confusion Centre spending, you know, they've just asked, how much more are they asking for right now? It's like another 15, a cool 15 mil, right, straight out of your back pocket. They earn as a dividend because 30 out of 30 picked the wrong answer on a 50-50 bet. The truth is, the US Studies Centre is not studying the culture of the United States, which produced President Donald Trump. They are a kind of charity for progressive left, you know, low intelligence, you know, academics who hang around a taxpayer-funded revenue stream. That is what they are. They are like the vent dwellers, you know, at the early stage of human life, who figured out how to get a form of existence that didn't require light. That is what they are. And it has bad consequences for Australia. So here you've got, you know, Gladys baby. Actually, I need to be careful I don't get sacked as well. I'm just going to wind this back a little bit. Ptolemy was a contemporary of Marcus Aurelius, not the Ptolemy who, you give me a time bell there, you've flown all the way from Victoria, now you're telling me to shut up. You wouldn't be the first, I can promise you. Sorry. You know, I believe Martin Parkinson, Brendan Nelson used to wear an earring. I believe Martin Parkinson should wear a nose ring. Okay, I believe he should go to work with a big bone through the bridge of his nose to let everyone know that intellectually he is a primitive savage. And I don't mind a guy being sort of deeply insecure and having a need to control things and wanting to take the world back more than 2,000 years to a pre-Ptolemaic savagery, but I just don't think we should make him the head of the Prime Minister's Department. Yeah. That's my view, right?
So, hi guys, I work for Fairfax Media, and I've written 2 books on Australian politics. Enjoyed your speeches. The problem with you outsiders is that you're too far outside, is that you don't compromise, and There is no question. The problem is that you pursue issues which will help Australians. You pursue lower taxes, deregulation, individual freedoms, issues that millions of Australians would agree with. The problem is that you marginalise yourselves by an obsession with climate change. Now, there is a perception in the community science is settled. But there is a perception in the community. Now, that's the problem. It is. So by pursuing it so hard, is that millions of Australians will not take you seriously. And I think it's the same thing with gay rights. I think you should champion gay rights, okay, because you're seen as xenophobic. So there is no question. I'm not making a question. I'm breaking the rules here, because you guys had a go at Fairfax, so I think I'm entitled to express my own views.
Get on, Schumacher.
Okay. I'm saying, narrow your message to ones which will have a broad appeal, and I think you'll have more impact.
Well, good on you. We admire your freedom of speech, and this is small fish here, isn't it? But it's reminiscent of those Trump rallies where there'd be hundreds of journalists lined up at the back, and Trump would say, "They are the most dishonest, disgusting people I've ever known," and the mob would roar and turn on them to the point where some of them would then come whinging like snowflakes onto their cable TV shows and say, "I think our lives are in danger at these rallies." But no such thing will happen to you, Aaron. I think Ross's mention of the Financial Review and half demonisation of you is a great reminder of how Trump did it.
The only point I would make, Aaron, as I'm open, is that I regard climate change from considered reflection, according to the lights that guide me, according to the data available to me, according to the capacities and limitations of my own mind, which I admit is flawed. I regard climate change as complete, unadulterated bullshit. The point I want to make to you is that the question is what I believe is not the important thing in terms of your question is what is in our interest as a movement. And I think the data, including from the ABC, from last year, in which is rarely ever tested, the key questions are rarely ever tested or reliably tested. I mean, the extent to which I would rely on a Fairfax poll in relation to community sentiment on gay marriage, okay, I would rely on it as far as I could physically throw George Christensen after 4 or 5 beers, right? I think you guys are not trustworthy to measure public sentiment on an issue like that, in the same way that the Deputy Secretary of the United States Department of Energy under Barack Obama has come out to Mary Kissel at the New York Times in the last 48 hours and admitted that the data being generated by Barack Obama's energy and environment departments in relation to climate change was complete bullshit. That's his testimony as a 4-year official in Barack Obama's own Department of Climate Change. He said we were systematically fudging the data. I'm open to your argument about, what the strategic view is. I know that the Australian Financial Review's Weekend magazine regarded the sexual preferences of 50 of Australia's leading CEOs and commercial actors as kind of more important than their contribution to the bottom line of the investors who own the company. That is not my view. I think you guys are obsessed with sexuality. I think you can barely publish a news article without getting sexuality into it somewhere. And frankly, the reason why I go to China for a week is to have a holiday from your fucking obsession with sexuality.
I shouldn't even try to say anything after that.
And the big issue about same-sex marriage, well, if you had a vote on the 8th of February, it would have been carried. But we've got to the ridiculous stage where the leader of the opposition, Bill Shorten, says we can't have a vote because people will suicide. In a democracy, the campaigns would be so harsh, gay people will jump off the gap or kill themselves because of a little bit of democracy. The sickness is not in the people that Shorten sneers at, the sickness is between Shorten's ears. To make that judgment about the Australian people is just plain wrong and a sickness in our democracy. These things get worked out the Australian way. We don't need cultural dietitians telling us what to think about all these things. The Australian way has been to treat people on merit, and the Australian pushback will come, and I say this from a Labor Party background, that we're losing meritocracy. We're not judging people on their merits. We're going down this identity path, which is primitive and barbaric, of judging people by how they look. You know, I've always thought Trump on trade needs to be understood as in other areas as a problem solver. Like Ross has done a great service for us in constantly bringing attention to the art of the deal. And Trump is a problem solver, and a lot of his rhetoric is very much refreshing because he'll talk about North Korea. We're going to solve that problem. You see, the conventional wisdom in the Obama administration was that the way to deal with a problem was to pretend that it might disappear. But Trump fronts up to the problems and sees himself very much as a pragmatist, as someone who can deal with these things in an empirical way, look at the evidence and act on it. And the trade issue really has given the United States two pebbles in their shoe. They've got a big trade deficit with China, they've got a big trade deficit with Mexico, and their only other trading partner that matters is Canada. So he wants to do something about NAFTA, he wants to do something about the Chinese trade deficit, nothing else really matters. He's not interested in some global trade war. So I think he'll deal with that as a problem solver. So I like that. I think the old ideological approach, or the pretend it might disappear approach, has failed in the past, and he'll get a lot of support just by dealing with these things one by one, to look at the evidence, to judge it rationally, and to prove time after time that he's pretty smart. Even on one area where it might be thought he failed, that's healthcare and getting rid of Obamacare. And maybe he thought that the biggest pain in the arse by far in that election campaign inside the Republican tent was Paul Ryan, the ultimate sunshine conservative. What? You know, I became fascinated with Trump because he was so anti-establishment. And it occurred to me probably at the beginning of last year that Trump, in his anti-mainstream media rhetoric, in his anti-foreign policy rhetoric, in his anti-Washington establishment rhetoric, and his general love of women, he would have had a ready-made place at the Green Valley branch of the Labor Party when I joined it in 1979. We wouldn't have fancied a billionaire, we would have thought he was way too rich. But for fighting the media, who we hated their guts, for fighting the foreign policy establishment, who we despised, for fighting the political establishment, this was someone railing against the elites in a way that working class people used to do. So it's a bit of a paradox that he's so wealthy, but we'll put that aside. And the fact that he loves beautiful women, well, what's more Australian male than that? And, you know, he had all these attributes, you see. So I became fascinated by this anti-establishment approach. And the person who was just such a constant nuisance with it was Paul Ryan. So what does he do? He says, well, let Paul Ryan put up the health bill. Let's see how he goes. And of course, the poor foolish idiot falls over, embarrasses himself, and now Trump eventually will get something through. He gets his own mandate on that and deals with the ultimate sunshine conservative, essentially by throwing some sunshine right up his clucker.